I do want to thank both candidates for coming out to this forum for the House District 66 seat. Former State Representative Ed Massey, you served 2 terms.
2 terms.
Thank you for coming. And then also TJ Roberts, thank you for joining us as well. I'm going to start out with the first question. And since TJ, you're the closest, I'm going to start with you. Tell us why you're running for this seat. You're a newcomer to running for public office. What drew you to want to run for the State House District 66?
I'm running for state representative because I believe we as a society have lost our way, especially at the governmental level. I believe that we have forgotten what the role of government is. The role of government is not to provide a specific result for a special interest. The role of government is not to give attention to special interests. The role of government is the protection of life, liberty, and property. Foundationally, people take an oath every time they assume office to the United States Constitution, and for the case for state representative in Kentucky, the Constitution of Kentucky. I don't take that as a ceremonial act. I take that as an actual oath. I believe that when you take that oath, it is your job to affirm the Constitution, even if it forbids you from getting a result that you would otherwise want. We are a nation that is ingrained by our Constitution, and adherence to the Constitution, I think, is a foundational aspect of our society that our government has forgotten about. And I'm running to make sure that we have representation that has absolute adherence to our Constitution, to our republic, and to our constitutional conservative values. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed, this is your second go-around. Served 2 terms previously. Why are you running again?
I'm running again because I want to do some work that I didn't finish when I was there before. First and foremost, I want to return civility to the process. The division of the party has become difficult. We have a supermajority in Frankfort. I think there's 80 members in the House that are Republican, 20 that are Democrat. It has become a free-for-all in some ways down there, and people don't even talk to one another to try to get things passed. So I want to return civility. I, too, believe in the Constitution. I don't believe in the Constitution over the Bible, but I do believe in the Constitution. In fact, I spent my entire career of 31 years practicing law here in Northern Kentucky, Ohio, and Indiana, practicing the Constitution. I've defended military members who defend our liberties every day, and I do that from a constitutional perspective. I do believe there are a lot of issues that are important to Kentucky that need to be decided. I was one of the members there when we passed the bill to lower the income tax. I was there when we tried to fix a lot of the issues surrounding our educational matters. And I was there when we tried to give support to groups like the Kentucky State Police that were woefully underfunded, and they got a $15,000 raise across the board because they have become a training agency for other departments. So there's a lot there that I want to do. I want to encourage our people to vote. I want to thank Commonwealth Policy Center for hosting this debate. I do want to thank you that in my past 2 elections, I was endorsed by the Commonwealth Policy Center, and I'm greatly honored by that. So thank you for having us tonight, and I look forward to this forum.
I want to go back to you, and I am keeping time up here, so I'm doing 2 things at once. I don't know. I'm going to go back to you. You brought up the Bible. You said that the Constitution is not above the Bible, and I've heard you speak in public about your Christian faith and how it shapes how you think about public policy issues. If you could expand on that, how does your faith influence how you formulate public policy?
Well, by all means, I'm a Christian first, and I became a Christian at 9 years old at San Run Baptist Church in Hebron, Kentucky. I was raised in that format with my family, my mom and dad, and my wife and my children. Many of you are here tonight, and I have followed that principle. In fact, I started my involvement in these forays with the Baptist Joint Committee on Public Affairs in Washington, D.C. as a board member, fighting for separation of church and state because government should not impair religious activities. So that has guided me. I believe that my faith is first, my family is second, and everything else flows from that. It doesn't mean that Christians can't have disagreements. We do. Goodness knows I've been a member of the Baptist Church for many years. I now attend First Church of Christ in Burlington. But the joke around the Baptist community was when a church divides, it's their evangelism plan, a new church is formed. Because people fight over power, principle, policy, and sometimes they don't get back to what the meaning of the word was. God told us to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul. And the second was akin to it, to love thy neighbor as thyself. That neighbor is not just Republicans. That neighbor is not just conservatives. That neighbor is everyone that God has put here on this earth.
Okay, very good. TJ, I think you've spoken on this topic too. Do you want to share how your faith has shaped you or think about public policy or politics?
Yeah, I've been a born-again Christian for several years, ever since a very young age. I got involved in youth ministry when I was in middle and high school. That was one of the top issues for me, was getting a good faith foundation. Ed and I are not going to find much disagreement in terms of ensuring that there is a good Christian faith community in Northern Kentucky. I fundamentally believe that the Constitution further protects the freedom of your religion, and that was an issue that I personally had to stare the barrel down on. In 2020, Andy Beshear did a press conference indicating that you were not welcome to go to church. He did this on Good Friday, right before Easter Sunday. I was doing everything in my power to keep churches open. I was resisting the lockdowns, and I made the decision on Easter Sunday that even though Beshear's threatening prosecution on churchgoers, I'm going to continue doing what I've been doing, and I'm going to go to church, come whatever may. It turned out Andy Beshear was not bluffing. I received a prosecution notice on my windshield indicating that I either have to quarantine for 2 weeks or for what essentially amounted to be house arrest, or face up to 1 year in jail. I opted for neither option. I filed a federal lawsuit against Andy Beshear with the help of one of the best attorneys in the country, in my opinion, Chris Wiest. We won in a unanimous decision in the Sixth Circuit, stating that the Free Exercise Clause means what it says. It meant what it said in 1791, and that meant that government cannot shut down churches, which I can't even believe that was a discussion to be had. But that is an issue that I am willing to fight for. That is an issue that I will continue to fight for now and until the day that my heart stops, because I think religious freedom is fundamental to our society.
All right, thank you. Thank you. I want to dovetail off of that question of religious freedom, and let's look at we talked about the Medical Rights of Conscience Act that the state Senate passed. You heard the responses from Representative Proctor and Representative Rawlings. So TJ, I'm gonna ask you, would you have co-sponsored or voted for those bills? First of all, is it necessary? And then secondly, to what degree would you have been involved?
It's necessary. Your freedom of conscience is, once again, one of those issues that is foundational. It's in many ways protected under the First Amendment. Unfortunately, we have governments that don't necessarily follow that. We have entities as employers that don't respect it. The medical conscience bill, I not only would have supported, I would have co-sponsored it, I would have fought for its final passage, but further, I would have taken it even further beyond just the medical profession. I don't believe anyone should be forced to betray their conscience in pursuit of career, whether that be their job, whether that be customers. One example is Representative Rawlings' House Bill 47. It's disappointing that it died after it passed out of committee. I would have loved to have seen that come to final passage, where we had a full Religious Freedom Restoration Act that would have made it clear that state government actors in Kentucky will be liable if they infringe upon religious liberty. I think it should go to the medical industry. It should go to every facet of your life.
Very good. Ed, where would you stand, or where do you stand on the Medical Rights of Conscience Act?
First of all, I have to tell you that I was there in the assembly when the COVID process broke out. And I will tell you, we were at odds with the governor because he didn't communicate with us at all about what needed to be done. It was a difficult thing. And in the last election series, a lot of my opposition put up signs next to mine that said, I voted to mask children, a blatant lie. We basically, what we did is we gave the authority, if you believe in the Republican concept, we gave the authority to local school districts to make that choice. Because what right do I, in Boone County or in Frankfort, have a right to make that decision in Fulton County that's 300 miles away? If we believe in local governance, That's what we have to believe in. The second thing, when it comes to medical conscience, I don't think we made anybody do anything against their conscience. People can choose to work, not work, go to a different job, take a different job. Unlike my opponent, I'm also a business owner. So I worked, we never shut our doors during COVID. We kept working, we worked every day. And, you know, we made the choice as a business owner. I can make a choice on what I wanted to do, whether it was mask, no mask. We by and large didn't have masks in the office. So the fact of the matter is, I do believe in medical conscience, and I think we need to protect people's rights. But at the same time, if we're going to grow a business like Northern Kentucky or an area like Northern Kentucky and invite businesses in, at the same time, we cannot command our businesses how to conduct their activities. And if somebody doesn't like it, they certainly have the freedom to go elsewhere, look elsewhere, seek other opportunities. They're not limited to one horse to ride, to use the pun, in the Kentucky state. So that being said, yes, I'm for protection of medical conscience, but I think we have to see, the one thing about legislation that's so difficult for these kind of forums is we talk in general terms. The details of the bill are pertinent. Wording is important. And so we have to look at all those things.
Okay, thank you. Yes, 30 seconds.
Okay, so we do not let private entities discriminate on several areas of our lives. Why medical conscience, why religious conscience is one that we're trying to bring in is truly beyond me. In terms of whether the vote to mask children is a lie, House Bill 51 would have banned government schools from masking your children. My opponent did vote against that bill. Local control is a great talking point to be used, but we don't use local control to justify infringements on the First Amendment. We sure don't use it on the Second Amendment. We sure don't allow it with the Fourth Amendment. We don't allow it with your constitutional liberties. We shouldn't allow it with your liberty over your family, over you deciding the direction of how you raise your children. Because at a foundational level, I don't believe government knows what the right way to raise your children is. I believe that's on you as a parent.
Okay, very good. You can, 30 seconds.
As a parent, I have the ability, the experience to make those decisions. And like my opponent, who's single, not a parent, not married, very young, very inexperienced. I served on the school board for 22 years. I know how local governance works, whether you like it or not. You don't have to like what I did or didn't do. But the fact of the matter is, I was recognized and reelected multiple times to serve in that position. So with regards to that, I do have that experience, unlike my opponent.
Very good. Thank you, Ed. I'm gonna pivot off of something you just said. In the last, I think it's fair to say, since COVID, the political tenor has grown shrill. Civility's decreased. Political threats. There was a story in the major news outlets just the other week about election workers being threatened across the country. A significant number of election workers that have people calling them and threatening them because they're afraid that there's some kind of corruption happening. So Ed, here's my question to you. There is frustration on a number of levels, and it could have partly been sparked by COVID, and some of it, election results didn't turn out the way that people wanted, or suspicions over some of the results. What is the solution to bringing civility, as you mentioned, that's important to you, and it should be to all of us? How do we bring civility back into the political process?
I think that we have to do a better job of educating not only our children in our schools, but also people in our community. The process itself is very difficult. You know, just getting out there, walking door to door, it's amazing how many people don't understand the full process. I can't tell you the number of people that don't know the difference between a primary and a general election. In fact, I was talking to a voter the other day, and they're like, great, we'll vote for you in November. And I'm like, in November, it won't matter in this county because the primary is the general election. Yeah. And it was amazing to me that they didn't know that. So we're trying to get out there and help people understand the process better. You know, Boone County has traditionally had a very poor turnout. We had 10% in the last election. And so of 31,000 at that time, 31,000 registered Republican voters, less than 4,000 voted. So if you really extrapolate that over time, that means maybe 4 or 5% of the registered folks in the county make the policy for 100% of the folks in the county, because people just don't take an interest, don't get out there, don't vote. I don't know if it's apathy because they're so put out with the incivility, the name calling that exists today, or they just really don't know. And so I think we're going to have to do a better job. I worked in the legislature with all members of the legislature. It doesn't matter to me if I'm for people over politics, people over party, because that's what we're about. It's not just the party.
Okay, very good. TJ, how do we restore civility back into the political process?
So that solution for me would be multifold. First and foremost, we have to stop taking policy disagreements as personal. One of the number one problems you get in Frankfurt is they take a policy disagreement as a personal attack on them. That's one of the first issues. One of the second issues, as the vice chair of Northern Kentucky Young Republicans, we've got to stop demeaning people based off of their age. We've got to stop that. Because at a foundational level, James Madison was younger than me than I am right now standing here before you when the revolution began. He was around my age whenever it came time to start drafting our founding documents. Alexander Hamilton was a teenager in 1776. Those two certainly had plenty of disagreements among each other. One was more of a centralized government. One preferred more limited forms of government. One preferred monarchy. The other preferred a republic. But the fact is, it was young people who built America, and I believe it's going to be young people who save America. So for those of you who are young Americans in the audience, please keep yourself involved. Get involved. Come out to Northern Kentucky Young Republicans events. Come out to Boone County Republican Party events. Get involved because your voice matters.
Okay, very good. Thank you. You want to follow up?
I do.
Go ahead.
I've read James Madison, and sir, you are no James Madison. And the fact of the matter is,
Okay,
the fact of the matter is, I will not let your youth and inexperience, in the words of Reagan, a very well-respected Republican,
so
to
we're gonna
affect this outcome.
We're going to try to I'm sorry, Ed. We're going to try to tamp it down. Let's take a breath. Ed and I'm going to ask, let's try to you and I communicate.
That's fine.
We'll try to steer it towards me, if you would. And audience, I ask that you try to keep it civil too. We do have a lot of questions, important questions that we want to get through on this. So Ed, go ahead.
So the fact of the matter is, it has become about personal attacks. And in fact, last week I was threatened. I was asked to get off of a golf cart, and the word was, I was told by the police, you can't use a golf cart in your campaigning. And then I was also told by a very reputable source, and I'm not going to reveal, that the caller demanded that I be arrested. So that's the kind of stuff we've come to. I mean, I'm out just walking, trying to inform voters, talk to them about their different things, et cetera. And that's what's happened to me just in the recent weeks. So the problem is, we do have these kind of personal attacks, these things going on. I'm not bemoaning anybody that's young. I was young once. In fact, when I was on the Baptist Joint Committee of Public Affairs, they sought me out because I was young. I was in law school at the time. But there's a difference in serving on that capacity and serving in the State House. And so we do need experience. We do need people that know how to get things done. And I think in my 4 years there, I passed more bills than any other member of the General Assembly, which means I do know how to get things done.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. TJ, did you want to respond? No. Okay.
I'm good.
Let's move on to certificate of need. TJ, this next question is for you. And I'll just reiterate, as I shared in the previous forums, it's difficult for a new healthcare provider to move into a community without the approval of existing healthcare providers. Where do you stand on certificate of need reform?
I'm not only for certificate of need reform, I'm for certificate of need abolition. I think it is unconscionable that private entities can stop other private entities from setting up shop, especially in a business such as healthcare. Thank you. You, as a Northern Kentuckian, in my view, are being so inadequately represented in our healthcare market because we do have a monopoly. It is an unfortunate situation. I don't blame any private entity for taking advantage of that system. I don't hate the player, I hate the game. Our healthcare system in Kentucky is foundationally broken, which has led to healthcare shortages. It is actually hurting rural healthcare, by the way, to be abundantly clear. I think we need to let the free market do what it does best and encourage private actors to provide the highest quality product that they can at the lowest possible cost. That is what we are missing out on in our healthcare market. We can look at how much competition exists in Ohio compared to Kentucky. We're not on the same playing level as them, unfortunately. We absolutely need reform, and if I could get rid of all certificate of need licensing in Kentucky, I would do it tomorrow.
Okay, very good. Ed, St. Elizabeth Hospital purchased the competition, and then they blocked Christ Hospital from opening up here in northern Kentucky. Should that be addressed through the legislature? Should that be allowed to happen, first of all?
Well, I think it absolutely has to be addressed through the legislature. And at some point before my time, that's how this all came to pass with the certificate of need, the debate, the battles, all those kind of things. I'm all for the free market too. I'm a business owner, so I understand how that process works. There is a task force that's been created in Frankfort of legislators to study this issue. I'm a firm believer. When I was there, I did this, of bringing and sitting down with every stakeholder, the private citizen, the hospital CEOs, nurses, doctors, patients, people that have been negatively affected by the hospital, gathering as much data and information as possible and making an educated, informed decision. The task force has indicated, at least to the body, that they haven't finished their work. So I would encourage them to finish their work, and hopefully they do it in a rapid way over the interim. And then at the beginning of the next session, that can be addressed, whether it's to repeal the certificate of need, extend it, whatever they do. I think they have to do it in the best interest of Commonwealth of Kentucky and the best interest of the region it serves.
Okay, very good. Did you want to respond?
Very briefly, I would have been a yes on Marianne Proctor's House Bill 204, which would have heavily limited it. I'm just going on the record of stating where I would go in terms of actual policy change.
Okay, very good. Ed, did you want to add anything?
I don't.
Okay. Let's move on to taxes and spending. Ed, this question is to you. Does the state of Kentucky spend too much of the taxpayer dollars? Is our budget too big, too bloated? Are we spending too much?
I think every agency of government probably spends too many tax dollars, whether it's from local government down from city councils, to some school boards, to state legislatures, to the federal government. I'm still aggravated since 1973 when the federal government said that they would impose IDEA and they would fund it at 43%. To date, they've never funded it over 19%, which means the state of Kentucky has to make up that difference for schools. It's an unfunded mandate. The schools are required to follow those laws, required to put those things in place. And if they don't, they get sued for it, which is a huge impact. And they get sued and it's affecting taxpayer dollars. So I think until government gets its act together and stops doing these unfunded mandates and saying, you have to do this, and by the way, we're not going to give you any money to do that, but we'd like money over here, we're going to have to deal with that. And I think that's why when I was there, we talked about like the income tax. That was an extreme move to try to move it from a income-based tax to a consumer-based tax. That way, the consumer chooses. If you're going to be taxed, they have a choice. Do they want to purchase it or not? Now, the problem with that is there are a lot of things out there that become necessities for us, like gas. And if you notice under this current president, what the gas prices have done, then you see how that affects our everyday lives. So with respect to that, I do think that we have to address this issue. Government gets involved in a lot of things it shouldn't. It blows my mind that in Cincinnati, the taxpayers that pay for Paul Brown Stadium can't afford to go to the game because it's paid for by big corporations. So it does boggle the mind, and I think we have to get right down in the weeds and figure that out.
Okay, very good. Is the state budget too bloated, too big? Are they spending in areas that they shouldn't spend?
To ask the question is to answer it. Absolutely, yes, we are spending way too much money, whether that's putting in botanical gardens in Louisville or bailing out unfathomably corrupt administrations like Kentucky State University. We are taking your money and we are putting it towards special interest groups. And unfortunately, Kentucky refuses to have the adult conversation about what spending cuts need to happen. I absolutely support getting rid of the income tax. What I don't support is replacing it with other taxes that are oftentimes regressive taxes. We're talking about gas prices right now. Under this current president, my opponent co-sponsored a bill that could have doubled the tax on gasoline over the next 5 years. I would have never done that. I would much prefer spending cuts before we ever had a conversation about raising consumption-based taxes, before we ever had a conversation about more property taxes. We're taxed too much because we spend too much. That's a problem that is in need of a desperate solution, which in my view is spending cuts. When we're talking about the Department of Education, when we're talking about those issues at the federal level that puts unfunded mandates upon the states, I'm endorsed by Congressman Thomas Massey, the one who wants to abolish that agency, to make sure that we have education more at the state and local level, that where we're putting the families place first, where we're actually looking to solutions to truly cut the size and scope of our federal government that is far outside the bounds of what the Constitution ever allowed for.
Very good. Ed, would
I
you
do
like
want to
follow?
respond to that. Two things. My opponent in past has said he's for the total abolition of the state. So totally eliminate government. To me, that's a basic difference from trying to do tax reform. What I would say about the gas tax is simply this. I drive on these roads every day and have for not 56 years because I'm 56 years old, but since I was 16, driven on the roadways. And if you've driven down to Louisville from Northern Kentucky, you could lose a car in one of those potholes. And the fact of the matter is those roads don't build themselves. They have to have money put to them to do that. The reason we have what we do in Northern Kentucky, we're the central place of the nation for Amazon to be here, for DHL to be here, for the programming to go out into the area, the products to go out into the area. And because of that, you have to have good infrastructure. And without good infrastructure, you don't get that development. And so you can't have it both ways. If we want to get rid of it and not give anything to roads, fine. Then we'll go back to horse and buggy and regress and do that. But if we're going to fix the roads, we're going to have nice things, you got to pay for them. There's no way to get around that.
Okay.
Very
You want to respond?
Yeah. More than half of our road fund does not go to roads. That has to change before we even have a conversation about raising the taxes on Kentuckians every time they go at the pump, especially under the current regime under which we are living. It is an atrocity to me to think that we should be raising taxes essentially for special interest groups, because at bottom, Boone County, the people of Boone County do not need a gas tax increase. Amazon might, DHL might. I'm not running for a state representative of District of Amazon or DHL. I'm running for state representative District 66.
Okay. Very good. DEI. I'm going to go back to you, TJ. Where do you stand on DEI policies, particularly in higher ed?
I think that DEI is a conversation that was foreclosed upon in Students for Fair Admission when they struck down affirmative action of giving preference to people on the grounds of race in 2022. I think it's unconstitutional. I think that House Bill 9 was the perfect bill for this, that would have prohibited racial preferences, would have prohibited DEI offices. It would have saved tens of millions of dollars per year as well by getting rid of these organizations that, in my view, are foundationally based upon the government treating you differently based on your exterior features rather than who you are, rather than your character, rather than your merit. I think it's absurd that we do that. I think it's demeaning. I think it's one of the biggest lies ever that we need programs like DEI in Kentucky.
Okay. Ed, where do you stand on DEI policies?
I agree that we need to get rid of DEI. Frankly, in my personal opinion, I'm for equal treatment, not special treatment of groups. I believe if you qualify to get into school, you get into qualify for a job, you should get the job. And the best person should get the job. So I think that's correct. I think I think it was University of Virginia that I forgot, they created like 276 positions at the university for DEI. And so it has passed its day, so to speak. I'm not even sure if it ever had a day, to be candid with you. And I think that we need to move on with that. There was some discussion about that when I was in the State House. I know the sponsor very well, Ms. Decker, or Representative Decker. And I know that one of the advocates for that, Michael Frazier, very well. And so with respect to that, I think that the time has come. I think there was some resistance because people don't like change. And certainly people that had jobs that were created by DEI don't want to lose those jobs. But we have to restructure and reaccommodate for those situations.
Okay. Very good. Follow up? No.
We're in agreement.
Okay. How about that? We found a place of agreement here. That's an
Can we make a
accomplishment.
rule again about the clapping on that?
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to start that. Yeah. I'm going to continue on with the education theme. Ed, you recently stated that you will stand by the voters of your district to support whatever choice they make in regards to school choice. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
But in the previous social media posts, and I don't have a date for this could have been last year, it could have been earlier this year, you said that you're opposed to anything that directs money away from already underfunded public schools. In another Twitter post, you said that vouchers and charters are devastating to public education and will create a new segregation between the rich and poor. So between those two public statements that you've made, have you changed in your opinion? Where are you on school choice?
No, it's pretty easy. Look, I've been in education for over 30 years. I substitute taught my way through law school. I was on the school board for 22 years. I served in various leadership positions of education. I still work as an education consultant. So I understand the way the process works. To some degree, I understand the SEEK formula, which a lot of people don't. And so the fact of the matter is, until the legislature, until the federal government lives up to the constitutional mandate that they fund public schools, a free and appropriate public education for every child, equitably and adequately, then we shouldn't be looking to other areas. We have a teacher crisis here. We can't recruit, retain, and the teachers at this day. Kentucky and its surrounding states, average salary is paid less than any of the surrounding states. In Boone County, we continually fought for the problem of people driving across the river where they can make $11,000 more a year. So my job when I was a school board member was to look out for the best interest of Boone County schools. And we were noted several times for being the best bang for your buck district. And people criticized us, said I raised taxes being a school board member. The truth of the matter is, as the property values went up, as the property values rose, our contribution from SEEK decreased. So even taking an increase, we weren't able to offset the losses because of the great increases in property values in Boone County. So we were growing and losing money. Why do people move to Northern Kentucky? Because they want to have a good place to raise their children, and that includes the schools. So until the government meets their obligation of what they already are supposed to do and meet the Constitution, we said when this bill was passed that they say I voted against school choice, we told them then it was unconstitutional. It's been deemed unconstitutional. So now there's a constitutional amendment. If it passes, I will follow the Constitution. So that's kind of where we are at this point in time. They've got to fund what they've promised to fund. Just an experiment of something else is not going to make a difference.
Okay, very good. TJ, where do you stand on school choice?
Your money should follow your children, not the systems. Period. You should have a say in this. When I look at private schools that are performing extremely well, I don't think no one should have that opportunity. I think every child should have that opportunity. And I think the best way to do that is school choice. I fully support this constitutional amendment. In fact, one of my goals is to make sure that we drive out turnout as much as humanly possible in November in Boone County for school choice. I fundamentally believe that if you believe in public schools, you should support school choice, because as a parent, you're not going to pull your children out of a school that is working well for you, generally speaking. You're just not. If it works, why would you fix something that's not broken? But as Representative Proctor said, one size fits all doesn't work. A great school for one kid may not be a great school for another kid. And for that reason, I think that the parent, not the government, should be making that decision. So I am 100% in on school choice, whether that was 2021 House Bill 563. I would have voted yes on that one. My one criticism of that bill was that it didn't have the floor amendment that would have made it statewide. I think that school choice benefits everyone, no matter which choice you make.
Okay, very good. Ed, do you want to respond?
First of all, I'm pleased that my opponent went to Boone County Schools and seems to have done really well. Also, I want to point out that with regards to our schools, we have to get our educational schoolhouse in order before we make these changes. When that bill was passed, 563, and I was there, that bill went from something that was a huge bill to being whittled down in a very quick process till we got basically a pilot project in Jefferson County in Northern Kentucky. The person testifying for that bill said that Northern Kentucky was the desert of educational choice. Well, that is totally false. That was just a misrepresentation of the facts. The fact of the matter is we had the first school of choice in the state with Ignite Institute. It's not just Boone and Kenton County. They accept schools from the region, from 9 different districts. Now, we heard earlier about some praise from Representative Rawlings, now running for Senate, about Ignite Institute, and said there was only 250 people. We learned that there's 1,000 kids in there. We wish we could build another school. That was because we talk about these big corporate special interests. Toyota gave us a $14 million facility that through grants and whatnot, we turned into what is now Ignite Institute, which has become a model for the state. So yes, I think there are options for students that are out there. I think we can do better and create more options. And so we have to work together in order to accommodate that.
Very good. Thank you, Ed. a response? No.
I don't think we should be holding our students back in the pursuit of fixing a system. I don't think we have to get every system in Kentucky in order before we move on school choice. I think students need that outcome right here, right now, because every single year is another grade level that they're missing out on opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Ed, there's the PAC I mentioned in the previous forum, Better Schools Kentucky PAC, funded by the Jefferson County Teachers Union. They dedicated $90,000 to help you get elected and to defeat TJ. Is that problematic when an outside group gets involved, especially when we're dealing and addressing a contentious issue, an issue that we all feel passionate about? Is that problematic?
Well, let me explain first what that is. First of all, I have no control over any of that. I don't get to touch it. I don't get to have any control over it. I don't even know what they're doing with it. I have no idea of what the outcome of that will be. That's going to be in many races whenever you have super PACs of any sort, whether it's on the federal level or on the state level. We have those kind of PACs that come out of gun rights. We have those kind of PACs that come out of the right to life movement. There are those PACs that exist, and there was some talk about reform of those years ago, and that kind of fell on deaf ears or just never materialized into anything. But can it be problematic on all levels? Yes, but it's got to be a fair and equitable playing field. I didn't create that. I didn't do that. I don't have any control over that. I wish I had $90,000 to choose where it went to work instead of trying to go back like Mr. Roberts and I both have been asking people for money for a long time, trying to get money to run our campaigns. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't have any control over that. I don't know what super PACs may be endorsing my opponent. I just know that it's out there.
Right. So on that line of, thank you for that answer, on the lines of endorsements, Kentucky Right to Life Victory PAC endorsed UTJ. How did you garner their endorsement?
I think my record as fighting for the right to life, no matter what, was a large part of it. You can see from my survey that I am 100% pro-life. I do not believe that the circumstances of your conception has any bearing on your value as a human being. You're made in the image of God. Your fundamental human nature that God gave to you confers upon you the various rights, and one of those rights is the right not to be killed. That's one of the foundational aspects of it. I mean, we can look at what Kentucky Right to Life has said in it as well. I've been involved with organizations, whether it be Northern Kentucky Right to Life, whether that be Students for Life. Fighting for life on college campuses is an immense fight because you are going to face pressure. But that is an issue that I refuse to back down on. I don't think there is a compromise to be made when we're talking about the right to life. And I think that's the contrast here. We're talking about Kentucky Right to Life that follows the sanctity of life. And then you're talking about JCTA, an organization that lobbied to keep gender mutilation legal, a group that lobbied against school choice. I think that shows a contrast about where we're going at with this race.
Okay, very good. And then
I need to answer that.
One other follow-up here. How about exceptions? Do you believe in exceptions, rape or incest?
No.
Okay, very good. Ed, go ahead. Where do you stand on the right to life?
It's important to note that when I was there for 4 years, I had a 100% pro-life voting record, even acknowledged by the Kentucky Right to Life. In the last race, I was endorsed by the Northern Kentucky Right to Life and the Kentucky Right to Life. So this time, we got a questionnaire, and I actually had a call with the executive director. And I said, look, I really don't understand where you're coming from in the sense that I had a 100% voting record. 2 years has passed. You endorsed me last time. My opponent has no voting record, and yet you endorsed him. He has no experience in that regard. And you've endorsed him. He doesn't have children, and you've endorsed him. Why? And there was a silence. And they said, well, we're going to recommend you. And then I didn't even get the recommendation, which is bizarre to me. Now, the comment I've heard since then is that there were some inconsistencies because I've made some comments about exceptions. Now, I agree with my opponent. We are created in the image of God. Where we disagree is we don't get to play God. So we don't get to make that decision. If a woman's life is in danger, which we've already addressed that, or somebody has been raped, or there's incest, there's a lot of factors that I can't imagine what a woman goes through in trying to make those decisions. As a male, as somebody that believes in the sanctity of life, I don't think that I'm a superpower that has the authority to indoctrinate or impose my beliefs on other people, on women, on girls, on people that have been affected by these horrible, horrific crimes or tragedies. And so that's where we part ways. I can't say that I wouldn't be for exceptions, because there are several of my colleagues that posted for or filed bills for exceptions. It didn't pass. It died off. But the fact of the matter, I'm sure that's coming back again. And yes, I would be open to exceptions for those circumstances. But given a choice between pro-life and pro-choice, I have been and will always be pro-life.
Okay, and just to clarify something that Kentucky Right to Life PAC put on their website, that they explained their endorsement, saying that your responses to their questionnaire was inconsistent with responses to another organization's survey, and that it's particular that you changed your position on rape, incest, and euthanasia and assisted suicide. So that is on their website right now.
We had that discussion with the executive director, as I indicated. Again, they never called me. They never had a conversation with me. They sent a piece of paper, a survey, which we get as you're a candidate. You're getting many of them, and we responded. So I was also told that a couple of questions were dropped out because the candidates couldn't even understand the long, windy, worded questions.
Okay, very good. TJ, follow up?
I cannot think of something more akin to playing God than making the decision to take human life based on the circumstances of that human life's creation. But second of all, in terms of the questionnaires, I believe that these organizations are entitled to our attention. I've been working on a survey for 2 weeks now, just making sure that I understand the intricacies of the issues. And both my opponent and I, we're both attorneys. We both know that attention to detail matters. That's important. Right? So my opponent, yes, he, from my understanding, I went back and looked at the Kentucky Right to Life survey that I submitted. There was a question about, would you, if elected, fight to repeal our laws against euthanasia and assisted living? Based on what Kentucky Right to Life has said, he and I are different insofar as, while my heart breaks for those who are in end of life, I sympathize with those looking for options. We can just look at what is happening in Canada and Western Europe, where we're essentially executing people, not in end-of-life situations, but we're executing people who are struggling with mental health issues, who are struggling with poverty. It's a disaster. It's something that we cannot let happen in the United States. We cannot let it happen in Kentucky. So I'm 100% on the right to life, and I don't believe there's an exception to that. I believe life should be protected from conception to natural death. I think that if there's any role of government, there it is.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the vaccine issue. TJ, in 2020, you brought this up earlier about your lawsuit against Andy Bashir, giving out citations to people who attended church in violation of his shutdown. Of course, you opposed not just the lockdowns, but also vaccine mandates in public. Do you regret any of your decisions on how you handled that issue of COVID, opposing the mandates? Let me take a step back and clarify. Early on, we didn't know much about COVID. We didn't know how it spread. As time went on, we learned a little bit more. But, and I'm not questioning what you did, but I'm wondering, in hindsight, would you have done anything differently?
I would have fought it all the more strongly. H.L. Mencken once said that the urge to save humanity is almost always a false front to rule it. And we saw that in every sense of the word, whether that be on March 27th of 2020, when we passed the largest spending bill in American history up to that point by voice vote, with only one person standing up against that, Congressman Thomas Massey. Whether that be on April 10th, whenever the governor said, if you go to church, we are going to send the force of government against you. Whether that be whenever Joe Biden said, you have to either get a vaccine or lose your job. Whether that be fighting for the right of people to refuse a vaccine mandate, whether that be through Savannah Maddox's House Bill 28, whether that be through federal lawsuits against agencies and businesses that refused exceptions for religious grounds while still granting administrative and medical exceptions. I believe in medical freedom. I believe that that is something that is sacred for you. I believe that no one, government, private, whatsoever, can coerce you to make medical decisions. When we're discussing how you receive treatment, I think you have a right to refuse treatment. I think that's a fundamental right. The Supreme Court agrees with me on that, and they've agreed with me on that since the early 1900s. So I don't regret it. If anything, my regret is that I did not go far enough in the fight against what we saw in 2020.
Very good. Ed, you were in the legislature when the COVID lockdown happened. Of course, we learned more as time went on. Do you look back at that time? You voted on a number of bills, mask mandates, the lockdowns, a number of things, pushing back against the governor in overstepping. Would you have done anything different looking back as far as your votes and some of the issues that the House addressed?
Well, it's always easy to look back, and say what you would have done. Hindsight's always 20/20. What I will tell you is, when this all happened, the leadership of both the Senate and the House went to the governor and asked him to shut down the session and let us all go home until we figured out what was going on, to call a special session and bring us back. And he said he wouldn't do it because it would leave us in too much power. And so his commentary about caring for all of the state did not apply, obviously, to the Senate or the House members. That being said, we went on and we finished the session. And the following year was when the mask mandates and all that stuff came out. So yes, we did a lot. I mean, people complained about us all year about, you're not doing anything. And I said, we can't do anything. Constitutionally, we can only meet in the 1 year, 60 days, the other year, 30 days. That's all we can meet. When we're not meeting, we can't act. We tried to pass a bill that would allow us to save days. So if a circumstance like this came along again, we could act. We put a constitutional amendment on the ballot and it failed. So that was terrible. I was one of the people that brought, I think it was House Bill 5, a piece of legislation to push back hard against the governor with respect to businesses and masks and all those kind of things. And no, I never voted to mask any child. That's a decision that was left up to the local people. If you're a libertarian or if you're a liberty person, and my opponent was a libertarian until 2017, then basically you believe that everybody has the right of free choice. Well, why should I then have the right to tell a parent what to do or not do with their child, or even a local governance of what to do or not do with their school? So the fact of the matter is that it's easy to say in the past we shouldn't have done that. I had an uncle die of COVID. So maybe it wasn't COVID, maybe it was pneumonia. I don't really know. I think there's a lot of false information out there about COVID, but I sure wish I had him back. I really do. And so with all that being said, instead of casting aspersions and threatening people, and I mean, there's people that just lost their marbles about masks. And I'm like, you know what? Yes. Was it an inconvenience? Yes. Did I hate him? Yes. As a trial lawyer, I'm like, how do you do a jury trial? You read the jurors' faces and see their eye contact. And how do you do that with a mask on? It's crazy. But I do think that we now are better armed and better prepared to deal with this in the future. I do think the governor had a 2-hour microphone for almost a year that probably influenced the outcome of the governor's election. So all that being said, yes, there are things that we would probably all do differently if we had the chance.
Very good. Do you want a response? Go ahead.
Calvin Coolidge once said that all liberty is individual liberty. It's not liberty to leave the decision of whether you are forced to send your children to a school that forces your child to wear a mask. That's not liberty. Once again, local control is a great talking point until we're getting really into the rub of things. We don't let local control infringe on the First, the Second, the Fourth. We've incorporated the Bill of Rights, except for the Seventh Amendment right of a civil jury trial, and the Third Amendment, except for in the Second Circuit, getting into some nerd conversations there. But we believe that your liberty is individual. I stand by that. I stand by my fight on that. And there are votes that I think are incorrect. When we're talking about masking children, my opponent did vote to mask your child by voting against House Bill 51 that would have banned those government entities from forcing your child to wear a mask. My opponent had a chance to impeach Andy Beshear for everything that he did to us in 2020. He decided against that. I would say that had a role to play in the 2023 election as well, because if he was impeached, that would have been a lifetime bar from him ever holding a position of public trust or profit ever under our Constitution. We could have taken that problem out with the legislature in 2021, and unfortunately, 7 members decided not to do so.
Ed, do you want 30 seconds regarding the impeachment?
Certainly.
Yep.
I was appointed to the impeachment committee simply because I was chair of the Judiciary Committee. Representative Petrie had been on there before. I was chosen to replace him. We heard from experts from the University of Louisville, University of Kentucky. We took insight, all of us on the committee, and we were told there is absolutely no constitutional basis for impeachment. If that's the case, I would take those educational scholars who've been there for 30 plus years over a young man at 26 that says it's a constitutional problem. So yes, we didn't impeach. There was no basis for it. Would I have liked the governor to be out of office? Yes, I would still like the governor to be out of office, but that's where we are today.
Right.
Very
Quick
brief
response.
Yeah. Roberts versus Nice. This was my case on the church ban. Maryville Baptist Church versus Bashir 1. Maryville Baptist Church versus Bashir 2. All of those cases were handed down by the United States Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. That's one step short of the Supreme Court of the United States within 1 month of each other from April through May of 2020. Then in November, Bashir imposes another lockdown specifically targeting religious institutions. All 3 of those cases, which are on point, said that that you cannot discriminate between religious and secular institutions. What does he do? Months later, he does it again. This is enough to overcome, in my opinion, this is enough to overcome his qualified immunity. This was enough to show such an outrageous disregard for our First Amendment. And further, when we're talking about experts, when we're talking about individuals from the universities, I think if 2020 taught us anything, any member of the political class telling you to just trust the experts is not being upfront and forthright with you.
Very good. We're out of time, but there's 2 other questions I'd like to squeeze in, and I'm going to ask both of you, could you give a 1 or 2 sentence response for each of these questions? And then I'll give you 90 seconds to close in your closing statements. First question, Second Amendment issues. Ed, you were endorsed by the NRA. Tell us, where would you have voted on the CAR Act? Very quickly.
I would have voted, I'm not for red flag laws. I would have voted against the CAR Act.
Okay, very good. Where do you stand on Second Amendment, TJ?
All gun laws are infringements.
Okay.
That conversation was settled in 1791.
I do have to point out, though, I have to have a response to that my opponent put up this meme that said, how many children must die before we have reasonable gun control? Answer, all of them. And so I do think that we have to have some reasonableness about us when we discuss these issues. This came out like a week after Uvalde, where parents lost their children. He defended it until there was pushback, and then he apologized and said he was sorry to be so insensitive.
Do you want to respond, TJ?
I meant it with my apology. It was a tone-deaf way to express my belief that all gun laws are infringements. I should not have done it. I'm not going to defend that statement. Unlike most politicians, I'm not going to run away from my mistakes. I foundationally believe that I've made that was a mistake. I shouldn't have done it. And sure, that can follow me for the rest of my life. That is fine by me. But at a foundational level, I believe that humanity is better than their biggest mistakes. I believe that there are things that we can do to prove that we are better. Okay. And I foundationally believe that it's unfortunate that we are talking about stupid statements. Because frankly, I have apologized for it, and I don't believe in defending it.
Thank you for explaining. Last question, gambling expansion. We've seen a number of bills passed by the state legislature in the last couple of years, HHR a few years ago, last General Assembly session, 2023, sports gambling was expanded. TJ, where do you stand on gambling?
I think that our statutory scheme that we have passed was such an act of corporate welfare where we essentially gave a monopoly on gambling, which is so dangerous. We have to make sure that we actually have a regulatory scheme that allows for protection from predatory practices, and handing off a monopoly is the exact opposite way to do that.
Very good. Ed, where do you stand on gambling?
I voted for expanded gaming when I was there. And the reason is, again, going to the liberty argument, if we're going to say people have the right to choose, they have the right to choose. If they don't want to gamble, they don't have to gamble. If they want to gamble, they can gamble. When we did a survey of Northern Kentucky, about 60% to 70% of the people surveyed said they were for expanded gaming in Northern Kentucky. We now have a new facility that brings millions of dollars in to our community.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We're going to wrap this up. I want to thank all of you for your attention. I want to thank again both of the candidates. Ed, who started out? Who did I start with the questions? TJ,
started.
did you start? So Ed, I'm going to let you start with closing comments, closing statements. 90 seconds, go.
Thank you. So I have been preparing in court here in Northern Kentucky for over 3 decades, longer than my opponent has been on the planet. I've represented multiple military members. And part of the issue with that is my going to these careless tweets. My opponent got into a debate with a military member where he said to him basically that he needed to get a real job and get off the taxpayer dime, and that he had no respect for the military. That is appalling to me, how we would not support our military. My opponent is, I believe, 26 years old. I think he has a bright future ahead of him. He talked about he brought this suit. He was the plaintiff. He did not argue the case. His now boss, Chris Wiest, brought the case and argued the case. The fact of the matter is he's only been licensed in less than a year in Ohio, and to my knowledge, he's still pending admission to the state of Kentucky. He's holed himself out as a constitutional lawyer. We pulled his CourtNet records. He has 36 cases where he appeared as an attorney, 34 of them mobile home evictions. I'm not sure what that has to do with constitutional law. Yet he's talked tonight like he's a constitutional expert. So that's a problem. He's been rumored to be on Grindr. He lives in the basement with his grandparents. The fact of the matter is he now lives in the basement with his grandparents because he lied on his application. In addition,
Okay, time out. Hold on, time out. Ed, we were going to try to keep this in the form and not personal. Can you close with you got 10 seconds. Close on a positive note.
on a positive note, I think the people need to get out and vote and make the decision. I think the decision is clear that you have somebody that has the maturity and experience to pass laws in Frankfurt.
Very good. TJ, last response.
I fully believe
Last
that
response.
we need an adult in the room, and what we just witnessed was the exact opposite of that. When we're talking about the military, my grandfather who served in Korea is in the room right there with us. When we're talking about my grandparents, they're right over there. I'm honored to have their support. I am honored to have the support of an incredible family. But let's talk about policy, and let's get beyond the allegations of a man who my opponent has endorsed, who is currently on probation for pursuing and attempting an illicit interaction with his underage nephew. So let's talk about that first. So let's talk about it. What is the role of government? The role of government is the protection of life, the protection of liberty, and the protection of property. I believe that we should be protecting that. We should have a limited government. We should do everything in our power to stand for the rights of the individual. We should limit the government as much as we can. And foundationally, my oath to the Constitution is not a joke. My belief that we take an oath, that we uphold it, that we not bear false witness, that matters to me. I believe in honest discourse, issue-based discourse. So if you believe that we should have a government that is conservative, not crooked, I humbly ask for your vote on May 21st. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Again, I want to thank both of you for participating. I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. Remember, Election Day is May the 21st. Early voting begins on May the 16th. Projected turnout in previous primaries, presidential elections, 30% to 40%, somewhere in there. So your vote matters. Please get out and vote. Commonwealth Policy Center, quick update on what we'll have available. This forum will be on our website and on our social media pages, hopefully within the next day or so. I'm looking at our media guy and, okay, he's nodding yes. So that's there. And then also we will have voter guides for all of the House and all of the Senate races. So you're free to check that out as well. There are a few hard copies over here. And then one more plug for the Commonwealth Matters program. That's our podcast. Sign up on your favorite podcast platform. Check it out. Sign up. We'd love to have you join our listening audience. Again, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for attending. May God bless you. All right.